Monica for my claim of fact speech. My major claim is that Donald Trump's presidency has a significant negative effect on the United States of America. I'm just briefly going to talk about how I believe that Trump lacks skills necessary for negotiating with Congress, how he lacks skills necessary for navigating through international relations, and also how his presidency encourages discrimination based on race and religion. So psychologist Dan McAdams describes Trump as being highly extroverted, disagreeable, angry, charismatic, untruthful, and narcissistic. There's a scale in which psychologists use sometimes to rank people. It's called the Big Five personality factors. On these factors, Trump ranks actually in the 0.78 percentile with agreeableness. And why this is important is because agreeableness is related to a person's ability to compromise and cooperate with others. So because of his agreeableness, I believe that he will have issues while negotiating with Congress. So in one article written by Robert Draper called Trump versus Congress, What Now? Trump makes a comment, he says, what I've done for regulations, moving jobs back into the country, what I've done for the airplane pricing and buying is amazing. We've done a lot. So while he actually boasts that he's accomplished a lot, Draper points out that he has not actually demonstrated his ability to actually shepherd a bill into law. And one example, when faced with opposition from Mark Meadows, who is the chairman of a pretty far-right Republican group called the Freedom Caucus, he told him, I'm going to come after you. And he also threatened other members of that group by saying you could possibly lose your job in 2018 if you don't vote yes to repeal Obamacare. And I mean, from this we can see that, I mean, that's pretty much a very rude way to kind of address Congress, especially when you're trying to get something done. So if we go back to talking about his personality traits, we can see how agreeableness affects him here, and we can also see how agreeableness might affect him when dealing with international relations. So in a journal written by Pfizer, the quote is, low scorers in agreeableness tend to be vengeful, stubborn, and are more likely to react to provocation with anger. In very recent news, a couple days ago, North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un hosted a parade in which he displayed just different military things like missiles, long-range missiles or whatever, and in response, America sent American warships over to surround the Korean peninsula, and the New York Times termed this as a poignant display of military might, in which they also pointed out that Trump's actions to do this are kind of unlike any of our previous presidents who have decided basically kind of to not address or not react to North Korea's behavior because they don't see it as something that's beneficial. And they believe that Trump's tweets and things like that can kind of provoke a leader like Kim Jong-un and cause a little bit more issues later on. Separately, on the issue of discrimination, during Trump's campaign, he famously said, when Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best, they're sending people that have a lot of problems. They're bringing those problems to us, they're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're bringing rapists, and some I assume are good people. He also overstated some crime statistics in which he stated over 500,000 criminal offenses are committed by immigrants. In one article, in one journal, that I found, author David Green, who is a teacher at Nagoya Law School of Law, he says that most academia agree that immigrants aren't any more likely to commit crimes than the native people. So on that claim, I believe that addresses his discrimination on race. We have probably all heard of the travel bans proposed by the administration, who proposed to block travel from primarily Muslim countries, and also there was a proposed suspension of the refugee program that we had, and this was in order to try and curb terrorist activity from either potential travelers or refugees from these places. But In fact, most of the refugees who come, I mean, there haven't been any issues from the things that I found. In one article, I found that as few as 20 refugees have been identified as either carrying out a terrorist attack or attempting to carry out a terrorist attack, and this is over the course of a 40-year period. So to wrap this up, I just wanted to reiterate that I believe that because of Trump's personality traits, that his presidency has a significant negative effect on the United States of America.
All right, the proposition is identified clearly. It's a kind of a broad definition, but it's defined by the three criteria that you talk about. You did preview what the supporting structure is going to be, so I thought that that was pretty straightforward. It's controversial. Obviously, he's a new president, just got elected, so there are people who feel differently about that and see it differently. So I think that it's reasonable to assume that the controversy is going on there. And it would be easy to point to protests and social unrest that have come about since Trump was inaugurated. So I don't think there's much dispute that there's a controversy here. The signposting of the secondary points is a little subtle. I do appreciate that you're trying to make it sound smooth. I do think, however, for an oral presentation, it's not a bad idea to maybe be a little bit more obvious. But I did see all of the secondary claims when you're presenting the argument. They were labeled. Like I said, I think you could probably signpost them a little bit more. The evidence is pretty good. I'm a little iffy about a psychologist evaluating somebody else using some tool, that they, if they haven't assessed the person and haven't analyzed them personally, that seems to me a little bit kind of iffy as evidence. But if the tool is a general one and there are ways to figure out these things, maybe that could be explained a little bit more. I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to be have some psychologist look at me and say, well, that's clearly a sociopath because, listen to the way he talks and look at his beady eyes and whatever it happens to be. I know that there's a tool there, but there's not much explained about it, and so I think that's a little iffy there. I do think, however, that you've got good examples of some of the behaviors that might be classified as narcissistic, self-absorbed, all of those sorts of things. And so I think that you did a pretty good job on that. Like I said, it was just the one thing I thought was a little bit iffy. The difficulty that he might have negotiating with Congress, I think you've got a couple of examples of things already, although there's a counterexample immediately that the refutation speaker will probably be addressing. The issue about the Freedom Caucus needs to be explained a little bit more. In essence, these are members of Trump's party who are opposed to him. There's a whole group of people that in the party who think that Trump's for lack of a better word, not appropriate as, I was going to say something different, but, that they see him as being problematic. And the fact that he's unable to work with people from his own party makes it difficult to believe that, on the other hand, I can imagine that the argument from the other side would be that the source of the problem is his opponents, who are intractable and are working in they've decided to try and delegitimize him in any way possible. It's awfully hard to work with somebody who's, sticking their tongue out and saying, no, I'm not going to do that. Of course, both of them are all doing that. This is the country that we live in. Holy criminy. Let's see. The stuff on the third point, I think, obviously Trump's comments are disturbing on The campaign thing, although the way that you attributed it being race, I think needs to be a little bit clearer. The refugee issue, you turn it into a race point. I think you need to explain why it's race-based. There are good arguments that suggest that these are not reasonable conclusions for him to arrive at, but I'm not sure that that supports the claim that you're making that says it encourages this kind of discrimination, that other people are activated or encouraged to see things in a negative way or to do things or to take actions that are problematic. I think that's the inference that the claim is that you're making, and I'm not sure that your evidence shows that. All right, thank you.